What's up, everybody? Welcome to BioS3 Raw TV. Today we're going to do a little more Bodybuilding Basics 101, and we're talking about fiber recruitment and muscle growth. Okay, so basically, what is the fastest way to stimulate growth, and what is the most efficient way to stimulate muscle growth? Now, I'm not talking about gaining weight. I'm not talking about looking aesthetic. I'm talking about gaining muscle. Okay, and this is how it works. We're going to be taking more excerpts again from Chris Aceto's Championship Bodybuilding. I like Chris's stuff because he has a way of explaining it that, you know, people like me, who I'm not very scientific, can understand it. Okay, and what he talks about is the key to muscle growth is the recruitment of type 2B fibers. Okay, and the recruitment is dependent on the load that's used or the weight that's used. Okay, so a very effective technique to garner the recruitment of 2B muscle fibers is called explosion. Exploding during the concentric part, so you're pushing out the eccentric part, and then lowering it down slowly on the bottom. So you got a slower negative than you do on a positive. Okay. Another technique he uses teaches the act of acceleration, or exploding the weight, where he pushes it faster and faster. Now this is what you'll see in a lot of my videos, Jay Cutler's videos, and many of the other guys' videos. Is as you take the weight off the rack, we'll bring it down, and all of a sudden we'll explode. But as the set goes, we start to get more of a rhythm. Okay, more of a kind of a piston pumping movement. That once we're in the groove, it starts to go, and that's acceleration. So what's happening is you're starting to bring the weight down in the beginning, and then as the set goes along, you're accelerating faster and faster. Muscles are basically made for speed. That's what they're built for, to help you get away from something fast, to help you fend off something. They're not made to lift weights. They're made to kill a creature that's trying to kill you, pretty much, in a nutshell. He says the last tip to recruiting type 2B fibers is to take the sets to positive failure. Okay, this is where I take my sets, positive failure. I don't go to negative failure. I don't go to static failure. I don't go to complete muscle failure, which is what Mike Mentzer used to do. He would go to total muscular failure. So what happened, let me tell you what that is, right? That's something different than what I do. So total muscular failure, you have concentric failure, or positive failure, which is the pushing of the weight in the bench press. You have the negative, or the eccentric failure, which is bringing down the weight. You have the static failure, okay? Static is where you would hold the weight out. Now, Mike Mentzer would go to, you couldn't push the weight anymore. Then actually, when you couldn't push it, somebody would lift it, and then you would lower it down on your own. And they would lift it, and all of a sudden you wouldn't even be able, they'd lift it and it would just drop. So now they would lift it and you would just hold it there. And you would squeeze, until all of a sudden you can't even hold it. You're not even able to hold it. Now you have failed eccentric, concentric, and static. That's total muscular failure. We go to positive muscular failure, which is the actual pressing part of the bench press. He says positive failure is where the lifter finds it extremely difficult to finish the final rep in the 6 to 12 rep range. And I train in the 7 to 9 reps, so that's, you know, pretty much just about where he's at. It's a good idea to have a spotter to accomplish this for that final rep. If a person tries to take a set of positive failure but has no spotter, he will inevitably re-rack the weight before going to failure, and the type 2B fibers will not be maximally recruited. Now this I don't necessarily find true if you're using a machine. Okay, so if you're using a bench press machine, you're not going to have to worry about the weights getting dropped on your head. But stuff like the squat, very difficult to go to positive failure on. Why? Well, first of all, if you hit positive failure in your squat, you're going to drop. So some people, you know, obviously are afraid to drop down in a squat and not be able to come back up. Second of all, your lower back and core is more than likely going to give out before you actually hit failure. So there are different exercises that you should choose, and if you ever watched Dorian Yates or Mike Mentzer train, they did use a lot of machines. Now they used Nautilus with Mike Mentzer, and Dorian used whatever they had over there. They had, in England, they had Nautilus, they had Hammer Strength, they had Cybex, they had Trotter, they had a bunch of different machines that he used over in Temple Gym. But if you're doing something like a barbell row, for instance, because this is how I hurt my back, going to failure on a barbell row, when your lats start to give out, everything else starts to break down too. Your lower back, your legs, everything starts to give out. So in essence, you're kind of overtaxing certain areas that may not be able to be overtaxed. So in essence, injury is waiting to happen. Another exercise that I don't feel like is good for dumbbell presses, seated dumbbell presses for shoulders. I feel like those are not very good for to hit failure on either, specifically because, or for me personally, as I'm pressing, as I get up through here, now what happens is my tricep starts to take over. When that tricep starts to give out and finally lets go, the dumbbell will just come straight down. And it's happened to me several times, and that's why I just exited out and said, you know what, I don't get enough from dumbbell presses anyways. So what's the point? Let's just keep them out. And that's when I started doing the lateral raises, very, very heavy, and those stimulate the muscle enough in my shoulder to make them grow, get thicker, harder, etc. So there are definitely different exercises you want to do when you go to failure. But also, remember, what I'm talking about right now is Bodybuilding Basics 101, which is teaching you about things that you may not already know. Okay, Basics 101. That does not mean that if you have been training for 3 weeks, that you're a basic beginner and you should go to failure on these exercises. That's not how this works. What this is giving you information that are basic information to apply to your training, but you should already be at the level to where you can go to failure and not hurt yourself and be able to stimulate the muscle at the same time. So just because this is called Bodybuilding Basics 101 doesn't mean that if you've been training 3 weeks, go try this, okay? Now, after you hit failure, how much is enough when you've hit failure? Now that's another thing. Now you would watch Dorian, and he had adjusted his sets and reps and stuff to where he would grow, and he would track his progress. That's one way to do it. You track your progress. So then he would log everything, say, okay, my weights systematically are going up progressively, and I don't have to worry about the fact that I'm losing muscle, because I must be gaining muscle because I'm getting stronger. So now let's try adding an extra set here and there. And all of a sudden he would notice in the log that it would stall. He would say, okay, let's pull those 2 sets out. All of a sudden his progress would continue again. So he was noticing that if he added those extra couple of sets, he couldn't recover enough to progress. Or if he had pulled back on a couple sets, which is inevitably what he wound up doing in the end, he wound up doing less and less sets to where he was progressing more because he generated more intensity per set. So he would cut back on the sets. Mike Menzer had actually, I think, reduced it to 1 workout, which was 14 minutes, if I'm correct, per week or per 2 weeks. That's how much he had gotten someone. That's not everybody. He had gotten someone to that level. And the way they figured that out was experimenting. So remember, if you're training to failure, you're going to have to experiment to figure out how many sets, reps, frequency, stuff like that you're going to need so you don't overtrain, injure yourself, or undertrain, because all 3 of those things are not going to get you to your goal and are bad. BioStraining@gmail.com. Leave comments down below. www.biostraining.com is the blog. I'm BioS3 and I approve this message, and we're Failure Training Bicep, and we're out.